Hey everybody, Bobby Medina here once again with my good buddy Paul Barron, bringing you guys another one of our episodes of tips, and I'll let Paul introduce this episode.
Well, we thought we'd call this COVID chops. We're all in the same boat. What's the catchphrase? We're all in this together. So I just wanted to talk with Bobby and put this out there and maybe ask you guys to chime in when you see this video. What are you doing with your COVID chops? Are you practicing more? You're practicing less? Um, and your thoughts on when we do get back to work, how are you going to ramp up to have the chops to be able to do that? So, Bobby, what are you doing during these times?
Well, I actually have more time than I usually do to practice, so I'm actually practicing more. And for me, I find practicing really fun. I try to make it fun for myself. I know that other people on our in our group have said they've practiced more. I've seen some people say they're totally unmotivated to practice because they don't have any kind of gigs coming up or whatever. So I think it just depends a little bit on your mindset. And for me, nothing will replace playing gigs, because that's sort of like it's kind of a weird thing, but it's like a different kind of playing. But I've broken down my playing into typically 2 or maybe 3 sessions each day. I don't like to practice too long at one sitting, we'll say, sitting or standing, which is another thing I've been curious about. I've been curious to know how many people sit or how many, let me know if you sit or if you stand when you practice. I do a combination of both. When I was younger, I always used to just purely stand because I felt like I got better breath support. But then I'd go play big band gigs or certain kinds of show gigs and things, and I'd have to sit down, and I always felt different. So I had a buddy of mine that was a great player back then in Los Angeles told me, man, you got to practice both ways. So I felt
That's a
so
great point.
I practice both ways now, especially now that I'm as old as I am. Um, but for me, the what I've been doing is the first part of my warm up, we'll say, is for me. It's not so much. It's for my head. It's not for my chops. It's to get my mind in gear, to get everything focused. When my head is really in the game, then all this stuff starts to work. It seems like when I'm distracted, um, and I have other thoughts coming into my practicing session, um, my chops sometimes go out the window, or they can. And there are other times, and we all know this. We're all human. Sometimes your chops are just so beat up, no matter how much focus and how much intent you have, it's really difficult to get them to go. Sometimes we're forced to, but other times, if we, like now, let's say your chops just don't feel very good at all and maybe you overdid it a little bit the day before. Well, right now I have the luxury to take a day or two off if I want.
Sure.
But I typically don't like to miss more than a day, and I only miss a day every now and then, maybe every couple of weeks or so. Even if I can just get on and play for half an hour or something like that, it still kind of keeps me rolling. But I kind of get through my physical warm up, get my chops really vibrating in session one, and that covers whatever I need. It's different every day. I have a lot of the same exercises for different types of things, like maybe for getting my chops going for just my first notes of the day. I don't buzz much on the mouthpiece. At one time I did, but I don't feel like I need to anymore. But if my chops really need extra focusing, then I might do that. I might have a little mouthpiece buzzing. I might do a little bit on a lead pipe, but not much. I get it going. And once I get that rolling, I may take a break. And I'll tell you something I read, and I read this in one of Al Vizuti's books or somewhere. He said he does his basic quick little warm up, and then he stops for like 20 minutes. And I always used to go from my warm up right into my routine, right into whatever it was I needed to work on. And that little 20-minute thing really lets everything settle. And when I come back to it, it feels great. So I don't know if people have ever tried this or if you've tried this, but for me, it really works. And then
I
after
definitely do that. Yeah.
and then after that, I may go into more of my physical exercises if I feel like I need to ramp up my strength and my endurance. And then if, later on in a third session, I'll practice more on repertoire or maybe uh, with some play along recordings, some jazz things or whatever. And so for me, that kind of rounds it off. But one of the things, just regarding this COVID chops thing is, we all kind of know where our line is. We've talked about that here before when it's time to stop, and sometimes we get excited and we're playing really well and we just go beyond our normal threshold. And sometimes it can have adverse effects. But at the same time, I think we need to push ourselves a little bit each day. That might mean, you know, playing extra. Well, for instance, like, we talk about the technique of practice as if you perform. Okay, so we can imagine we're standing out in front of an audience on a stage, and it changes kind of your mentality a little bit. But we don't always practice the piece from the beginning to the end, or maybe you're set. Sal Cracchiolo was talking to me about how he practices his Tower of Power stuff, and they have recordings. And he warms up, and then his routine is he goes through the whole 75-minute show from
Sure.
top to bottom, just as if he would do it nonstop. Then he takes a break, and then he does a second show, just like he would in a real situation. So I think those are some ideas, and that's some of what I've been doing. And I feel like I'm playing pretty well right now and really strong. I feel like I could go right back to a gig right now. I'm ready, but I haven't been playing in any kind of an ensemble for the most part.
It does different things to your chops, that's for sure. Playing with a group and also I think just the physics of when we're playing on our own, there aren't other frequencies coming into the mix. You're not surrounded by sound. If the bass is too loud, you can almost. I don't know if anybody's felt that, but have you, Bobby? I've actually felt the air being moved
Oh yeah.
in through the bell up pounding against my chops, particularly when I'm just taking a breath and I go boom boom and you can feel that.
Oh yeah.
So imagine then you're having to counter that and blow through that. Kind of interesting. But yeah, the COVID chops, my routine is I I heard that Doc Severinsen likes to think in threes. Like if he does anything less than about 3 hours, he doesn't really feel like he's accomplished what he wants to do in the day, or he doesn't feel like he's going to be in shape enough or whatever. So I've used that for years. So my thing, like you, Bobby, is I get a warm up in, and I talk about this. Is it okay to do a little pitch
Oh
on
sure.
my
Yeah,
book?
yeah. No, no, absolutely.
So I have a book on warm ups, and I've written three distinct warm ups, and the reasons are different depending on the time of day and how your chops are feeling. But during this COVID time, um, I really want to make the distinction of when I'm warmed up and when it transitions, like you were talking, Bobby, into practice. So I always stop after I feel like I'm warmed up. So that might be 30 minutes. It might be 45 minutes before I feel like I'm warmed up. There are times where, geez, 5 minutes I feel like I'm totally warmed up. And that's okay to put down the horn at that time. So I feel that's important to learn your body. And so I'm
It's
not
kind of
locked into the
interesting.
same.
It's kind of interesting because some days you get up and you just know you're going to be on. And
Yeah.
other days, the night before, you just go, wow. It's going to be rough.
Exactly.
And I had somebody a long time ago. I worked on a cruise ship for some time, a long time ago, and I had this trombone player of all people told me this thing, this saying, and he said, "Remember that however good or bad your chops feel when you put your horn away is how good or bad they're going to feel the next day." And it's pretty much true. I don't think I've ever felt horrible one night and then woke up and been able to just pick it up and feel great on it.
And I'm sure the inverse too, feeling, yeah, interesting. I'd have to take notes of that to see how I feel. Well, that's kind of why I have this thing I call the morning after warm up, which is basically just a way to wipe the slate clean of all the damage that I might have done the night before, um, and and again just listen to my body and get the vibrations working with the least amount of effort and most amount of efficiency, and that's my attempt. So
Well,
that's my first set. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I'm just going to back up because your book is great. It's spot on. I mean, I purchased it a long time ago when it came out, and it has a lot of interesting things. But I thought this was really cool, how you have variances in your warm up, and it's one thing that I want to shout out to everybody out there. Everyone needs to take the time to at least experiment a little bit with what works for you personally. What works for Paul may not work for me or vice versa, but you got to do a lot of experimentation because we're all unique in this. And when you're talking about that wiping the slate clean, I've always called it for me like a warm down damage control at the end of a gig. But I have read that Doc Severinsen on many occasions, kind of regularly, I seem to believe that he would practice after the gig. He would go back in there and go work on everything that he felt maybe wasn't just right or whatever in his performance. I've never heard of that after leaving it all on the stage and totally burning and then practicing another couple hours.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that's more dedication to the horn than I think I have. But
Definitely.
but I do have to say, I've also heard that people do that. I didn't know that about Doc, but what I like to do, if I have the opportunity to do it, is maybe stay in the theater after it gets a little, cleared out, and I'm not bothering the crew and so on. Is just to play some long tones and like really like a Bordoni or a Conconi vocalese,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels to me like I'm bringing the focus back in, so that the next day when I pick up the horn, I've already wiped that slate clean or done the
Mm-hmm.
damage control as you said, and it really does help. And that's usually the thing that I do in my third session of practice in a day if I'm not gigging. Is that'll be my lyrical studies, or it could be playing along with Jamie Abersol, but doing like a ballad, album or something,
Mm-hmm.
or at least just playing really gentle and very focused and controlled to try and get everything feeling really good, um, preemptively for the next day, so that I can get up and get on the horn and it already feels pretty good at the start of the day.
Right. And getting back to this first warm up, and getting into this subject of when you may be a little bit beat up and not feeling great. I have my couple things like I like to use. I mean, I'm a stamp student. So for years I did all the buzzing and did all the patterns and did the da dee da da dee da da, all that whole series. Now I vary it quite a bit. I like the Don Jacoby warm up. It's just a very quick little thing, and if I'm feeling halfway decent, it gets everything rolling. If I need a little bit more, then I may do a little more, a few patterns, getting me into the pedal register. But I don't use the pedal register a ton. I know some people love them, some people don't. Or do you use pedal tones? Do you like pedal tones? And if so, when do you use them?
I incorporate them throughout my warm up. So when I'm doing things, I've got sort of a just post warm up thing that I do that involves Clark Study 2, but I go through all bunch of modes and half whole, whole half, and so on. But each of those times, I take it down to the lowest pedal note that I can play. So if I'm in F sharp, I'll try and get down to, double pedal F sharp, whatever, at the end of that key, and then when I'm in G, and so on. So throughout my whole warm up, I'm doing pedals quite a bit, and for me, it's it's interesting. I think somebody just mentioned one of their the tips that or one of the things that they most valued, I guess, that helped them the most in their playing was being able to play a pedal C open. And for me, that's sort of
Oh
a
yeah.
barometer in that if my chops are working right and I've got the right, placement and it's sitting in the right way and I'm not too swollen and so on, I can get an okay. It's not good. I can't use it like Arturo Sandoval, but it's certainly not musical. But if I can get it, that tells me that my body and everything is set up pretty well. If I can't get it to save my life, I know that I have to spend a bunch more time in the pedal register to try and loosen things up and maybe flush away the lactic acid and get the
Hmm.
blood flow really going. Like Bobby talks about with the lip flapping, the
Yeah,
horse,
exactly.
that stuff. But for me, it seems like if I'm doing the pedal register stuff, all of that, that is way out here, which is great. Also for me, it pinpoints it there, and it's even more of a hyper kind of relaxation um, time for my chops.
It relaxes me, but no matter what, it doesn't matter what time of the day, how hard I've been playing, how little I've been playing, I always got a pedal C open or with all three. It doesn't matter. I can do it either way. And I think
Wow.
part of it for me is I couldn't play it for a long time when I was in high school when I first started learning about it, but then I finally figured it out. But I think I was playing on a really wide, big. I mean, I played on an old, like a Claude Gordon, one of the big giant mouthpieces that he used to, use. And I don't know, maybe that helps set it up in the right way for me, but it doesn't. I mean, they help me to a degree. I don't like to overdo the pedal register personally. Um, but it does feel good. I know kind of when to stop because I feel like I get mushy if I do it too much. And I don't, I want to maintain the firmness here, some firmness.
Interesting. And I know that I think you had talked, Bobby, about how Eric Miyashiro says it's like kryptonite to him
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
playing pedal tones. And boy, he's sure got a handle on the whole horn. And man, whatever he's doing it right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we're all
everybody's different.
different, We're
Yeah.
all we're all very much different, which is why I always tell people when I'm doing master classes or when I'm teaching or whatever, I always tell people I can give you ideas, and I'll give you if we're talking about everybody wants to talk about range all the time, so I might have three different types of range studies that I give them. But I'll say, find the one that really works best for you and then start to vary it a little bit. Do things in different keys, do things different volumes, do them 2 octaves instead of 1 octave. Instead of just going up, start going down, start at the top and go down, and those kind of variances, I think, they're like what we've talked about, the muscle confusion kind of thing. Because for me, if I do too much of the same thing, and this is a great question for you when you're doing your shows 8 days a week, 50 weeks a year, or whatever, you must have to do some serious muscle confusion because every night can get you, can make it feel just, I don't know, can without variance, it seems like the muscles stop working properly.
Yes, there's a term that a friend of ours, Brad Allison, has mentioned when he was in Vegas playing shows there. The guys used to call it stupid chops. And what they meant by stupid chops is when you're locked into a show And there comes to be a point, if you're not really careful about balancing the show and practice, where you can only play the show and you've only got enough chops to get through that 90-minute show twice a night, 6 days a week. And they may be strong as hell to do that, but they can't play a low C or even the G above that to save their
Yeah, you
lives.
lose your
So,
finesse and you lose the road chops. A lot of people talk about that.
yeah. So I have a thing, it's another chapter in my book where I talk about balancing practice and show. And sometimes it's really easy. I give a couple examples where I talk about playing in the Heights, and I toured that for 2 years, and it had double A's all over the place. The last note of the show was a double high B. Um, there's a solo that comes in. Raul Agrez is a friend of ours on this page, and he can attest to that because I had to play his solo every night. And it just comes in out of nowhere. You're just sitting there, and all of a sudden, a high E, wah, da, 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 and then it goes up from there. Um, and when I first got into the run of the show, I built up to it and I was ready for it. I was practicing, and we could talk about how I, prepare for a show physically, but that's maybe for another episode. But I felt really strong and everything was great. A month or two into the run of the show, things are a little more difficult. I could still get through the show and it was just fine, but boy, it felt like I only had barely enough to get through the show. And then I recalled Brad's description of stupid chops, and I realized, you know what, I wasn't balancing the rest of the horn, the rest of my playing with the show. So with that particular production, it was easy. Okay, well, that's a lot of high, loud playing. What's the way to counter that? Well, to play lots of low and soft playing. But other shows, you're kind of running a big gamut of expectations or things that you need to bring, all sorts of different tools you're using for the show. But it still is a balancing act, and sometimes that's a little more difficult to figure out how to counterbalance the show. But it just takes some thought. If you're feeling really stiff and you feel like you're strong here, but you're really stiff here and not very flexible, well, tells me that I need to work on more flexibility throughout the day and do it really gently and efficiently, and making sure that it's responding in an easy way that when I get to the show and I really got to step on the gas, my chops are responding in that efficient way. So it's funny, practicing more earlier in the day on a hard blowing show is actually more beneficial than the rest that I initially thought I would need throughout the day. I didn't want to lose anything for the show. I didn't want to waste any good notes in the practice
Right.
room. So I'd save it all up. But yet, when I realized that, doing a good warm up in the day, maybe some counterbalancing practice, I would come to the show and feel so much better.
Well, let's address one last thing here because this
Okay.
has come up in the group, and we've discussed it, I think, in some threads here and there. But it's a whole idea about when you have the mouthpiece on your chops, this part that's inside the cup of your mouthpiece really needs, in my opinion, needs to be as relaxed as you can get it so that it vibrates and you have flexibility to move around anywhere. And the support needs to come from around, the rest of these muscles here and here. So I'm wondering, like, do you think about this, or when you first learned to do this, how would you explain this? I have my ideas, but I'd like to hear yours.
Sure. Yeah, I enjoyed that thread that we had going a little while back. Seems to be a wide spectrum of thought on this. But my feeling is that my aperture needs to stay as loose and open as possible. And I try to think of it as whatever is just inside the cup, that should all be vibrating. So that whatever amount of air I put through, if it's all vibrating, that in my head, that means I'm playing more efficiently. I'm not over clenching and not allowing or impeding a vibration. So whether it's true or not, and I haven't done the visualizer, but I really do feel that my aperture stays about the same size from low G up to double C, and the only thing that changes is my tongue arch and the speed of the air, and then the amount of, I don't know if I can do this way. So if my aperture here, I'll move it over here. So if my aperture is here, mostly for whatever range I'm playing, if I'm playing a low C, I don't have to grip with the muscles around here. I don't have to grip to keep it in place as much. As I'm going up to a high C, the aperture stays the same size, but I'm having to grip around it more to keep the air from blowing my chops too far apart
Exactly.
as I'm speeding up the air. And when I get to a double C, it's going to be the same size, hopefully, but it's faster air creating a faster vibration, but I'm not opening and closing it. But
Right.
I do think of the aperture as the volume knob on your stereo. If you need more volume, then you just open up a little bit more, and there's more volume of air coming through, not faster air, just more volume. And as I'm playing softer, I bring it together so that I don't have to have as much air volume wise to get the lips vibrating at a softer volume, if that makes sense.
Right. I had learned a couple different things about volume, but one thing that helps me visually do it is like imagine the column of air. If you just when you're talking about a column of air, if it's real small, that's piano. If the column of air is wider, that's forte. But if
Sure,
the column of if the speed is slower, you're playing in the lower register. If the speed is higher, you're playing in the upper register. you know
exactly.
but one of the things when you're talking about the grip, so this means a different thing visually, mental visualization, it could be different for everybody. But I heard somebody when I was in high school say, yeah, I really learned to grip my mouthpiece. And I thought, wow, what does that even mean? And I tried all this stuff, but for me, after many years of doing it, I feel like when I play, my lips grip, like here's the airstream. They grip the airstream. And so I'm not sure if what you're saying is that's what you mean when you're talking about gripping, but for me, that helps keep them from spreading when I'm playing up in the upper register.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. More grip just to keep the chops in place in that same position with the faster air. You have to grip more to keep it from spreading, as you said, in the upper register, and then you can relax a little bit more, but still keeping that focus there for the low register. You don't have to use as much energy and grip through here for the low register.
So one of the other things that I feel like for me, and I don't know if you feel like this, but to keep this somewhat relaxed in there, I feel like the muscles right underneath the rim of my mouthpiece. I know this whole area, we call it some people call it the donut, right? But for me, the muscles right underneath the rim of the mouthpiece feel like they need to be activated. But that's out here, that's not here on the red. And it's a little bit of a visualization to kind of make that happen for me, because I feel like if I don't engage these out here, then the pressure can eat away at what I'm doing. So do you feel like
Interesting.
that?
I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but I'll give that a try. Yeah, I had always heard that it's not just your corners, on the side, but since we have a whole set of muscles all around here that you got to think of, that there's pictures in certain method books of arrows pointing
Right, right.
from all different directions down into the center, and that's what I try to think of as the whole thing coming forward. I had a mentor amazing trombone player, band leader, educator by the name of Dave Robbins. You can look him up on YouTube. Look up Dave Robbins and Harry James. He was one of Harry James' favorite lead trombone players. An
Hmm.
amazing guy. But he had all of these different analogies and visuals. And one of the things he said is just think of it as like a mask, and all of it is just coming forward and focusing in that one spot, but up from here and then in through here and stuff too. I guess he had studied with opera singers and talking about how to make that whole thing a resonating chamber, and
Right.
that was an interesting concept.
Very cool. Well, I think that gives a few thoughts, anyways, on on these subjects and on COVID chops. So I hope everybody gets a little something out of this, and you'll chime in and let us know what your thoughts are and what else you might want us to discuss. So we're and just a couple of other little things. We are in the process we of scheduling some really cool interviews with some exciting guests coming up. So I'm going to leave it at that, but be on the lookout because they're not too far away. So thanks everybody for being here. Thank you, Paul, and
You
we'll
bet.
all talk soon.